In Plato's dialogue Euthyphro, he presents his title character as a prophet. For my own part, when I speak in the assembly about matters of religion, and I tell them in advance what will occur, they laugh at me as if I were a madman. And yet I never have made a prediction that did not come true. Well, Socrates then talks of his uncertainty of his own future, and then he says, "Only you prophets can tell." Euthyphro is a pious man, and in the course of his conversation with Socrates, he explains that he is prosecuting his own father on the charge of murder. The victim in this case was a laborer of mine, and when we were cultivating land in Naxos, we employed him on our farm. One day he had been drinking and became enraged at one of our domestics and cut his throat. Whereupon my father bound him hand and foot and threw him into a ditch. Then he sent a man to Athens to find out from the seer what ought to be done, meanwhile paying no attention to the man who had been bound, neglecting him because he was a murderer, and it would be no great matter even if he died. And that is just what happened. Hunger, cold, and the shackles finished him before the messenger got back from visiting the seer. We learn that Euthyphro is at odds with others in his family, who say that the father did not kill the man. My father and my other kin are bitter at me when I prosecute my father as a murderer. They say he did not kill the man, and had he actually done it, the victim was himself a murderer, and for such a man one need have no consideration. They say that for a son to prosecute his father as a murderer is unholy. From here, he and Socrates begin a discussion of what holiness is. In the course of this discussion, Euthyphro makes reference to the mythological story of Zeus punishing his own father, Cronos. I say that the holy is what I am now doing, prosecuting the wrongdoer who commits murder or a sacrilegious robbery, or sins in any point like that, whether it be your father or your mother or whoever it may be. And not to prosecute would be unholy. And Socrates, observe what a decisive proof I will give you that such is the law. Does not mankind believe that Zeus is the most excellent and just among the gods? And these same men admit that Zeus shackled his own father for swallowing his sons unjustly, and that Cronos in turn had gelded his father for like reasons. Saying that Cronos had gelded his father is a euphemistic way of saying that he castrated him, and this point will come up later in the video. But now they are enraged at me when I proceed against my father for wrongdoing. And so they contradict themselves in what they say about the gods and what they say of me. Socrates expresses doubt as to whether myths can be believed on face value. Whenever people tell such stories about the gods, I am prone to take it ill, and so it seems, that is why they will maintain that I am sinful. And Socrates asks, and you actually believe that war occurred among the gods, and there were dreadful hatreds and battles and all sorts of fearful things like that? And so Socrates is raising a question about how to approach religious writings. In his day, these writings took the form of mythology. Does Euthyphro truly represent the correct way to read mythology? Did Cronos and his father Uranus truly act unjustly and so deserve punishment? And were they punished? Is that really the meaning of the myth? In order to answer these questions, we need not only to learn the myth, but also to unfold the esoteric metaphysical teachings captured in the surface story. There are numerous variations of this myth. What I am going to present here is the story as told by Hesiod in his Theogony. But Rhea was subject in love to Cronos, who also happened to be her brother, and she bare splendid children, Hestia, Demeter, and god-shod Hera, and strong Hades, pitiless in heart, who dwells under the earth, and the loud crashing earth-shaker, who you may know as Poseidon, and wise Zeus, father of gods and men, by whose thunder the wide earth is shaken. These great Cronos swallowed as each came forth from the womb to his mother's knees, with this intent, that no other of the proud sons of heaven should hold the kingly office amongst the deathless gods. Heaven, by the way, is another name for Uranos, who is Cronos's and Rhea's father. For Cronos learned from Earth, who is also known in Greek mythology as Ge, and she is Cronos's and Rhea's mother. And he learned from earth and starry heaven that he was destined to be overcome by his own son, strong though he was, through the contriving of great Zeus. Therefore he kept no blind outlook, but watched and swallowed down his children, and unceasing grief seized Rhea. But when she was about to bear Zeus, the father of gods and men, then she besought her own dear parents, earth and starry heaven, to devise some plan with her, that the birth of her dear child might be concealed, and that retribution might overtake great crafty Cronos for his own father, and also for the children whom he had swallowed down. Now, retribution for his own father is a reference to another story in which Cronos castrated his father, Uranos, or Heaven as he's called here. Well, the parents readily heard and obeyed their dear daughter, and told her all that was destined to happen touching Cronos the king and his stout-hearted son. So they sent her to Lyctus, to the rich land of Crete, when she was ready to bear great Zeus, the youngest of her children. Him did vast earth receive from Rhea in wide Crete, to nourish and to bring up. Thither came earth, carrying him swiftly through the black night to Lyctus first, and took him in her arms, and hid him in a remote cave beneath the secret places of the holy earth, on thick-wooded Mount Aegeum. But to the mightily ruling Son of Heaven, the earlier king of the gods, she gave a great stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. Then he took it in his hands and thrust it down into his belly. Wretch! He knew not in his heart that in place of the stone his son was left behind, unconquered and untroubled, and that he was soon to overcome him by force and might, and drive him from his honors, himself to reign over the deathless gods. And what happened after this? Well, after that, the strength and glorious limbs of the prince increased quickly, and as the years rolled on, great Cronos the wily was beguiled by the deep suggestions of earth, and he brought up again his offspring, vanquished by the arts and might of his own son, and he vomited up first the stone which he had swallowed last. And Zeus set it fast in the wide-pathed earth at goodly Pytho, under the glens of Parnassus, to be a sign thenceforth, and a marvel to mortal men. And he set free from their deadly bonds the brothers of his father, sons of heaven, whom the father in his foolishness had bound. And they remembered to be grateful to him for his kindness, and gave him thunder, and the glowing thunderbolt and lightning. For before that, huge earth had hidden these. In them he trusts and rules over mortals and immortals. In other versions of this story, Zeus cut his father open to release his siblings, rather than Cronos vomiting them out. And crucial to understanding Euthyphro's reference to this myth is that it is generally agreed that after freeing his siblings, Zeus castrated his father, who in turn had castrated Uranus. This will become significant as we get into the exegesis of the myth. To see what this myth means, I will take it piece by piece. Now, this, of course, is my own analysis, so I'm interested in reading your ideas in the comment section. Okay, so first, Gaia and Uranus told Cronos that his son would overcome him. So what does this mean? I'm going to turn now to metaphysics. Uranus, Cronos, and Zeus are each fathers of different metaphysical realms. Gaia and Uranus were therefore foretelling the necessity of a further unfolding of realms beyond that of Cronos. Uranus represents the realm of wholes, of intelligible being. This is the realm of unity. His son Cronos represents intelligible intellect. This is the activity of being. Intellect reverts to being, and this activity, which is called ousia in Greek, results in intelligible intellect. Now, this is also a unified whole. In Platonism, we often call this divine intellect or divine mind. Other systems refer to it as awareness or consciousness. Now, Zeus is also an intellectual god, and perhaps confusingly, he is also called intellect or mind. However, he differs from his father in that he unfolds the physical realm. So he is therefore called the demiurgos, or the creator god. So this would then make him the Greek counterpart to the God of the Bible who created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Okay, now I'm going to turn to the Platonic philosopher Proclus, who lived about 700 years after Plato. He was one of the headmasters of the revised Platonic Academy of the 5th century. He expounded on the metaphysics that Plato only hinted at in his dialogues. To explain realms of reality, Proclus made use of the notion of triads. Each realm is what it most truly is, which I will call its being, or what it is. It also has some power, and it has its own proper activity. Now, these three collectively can be used to describe that realm. That which the realm truly is mythologically referred to as the Father. And so the Fathers can be used as a shorthand of sorts to describe their realm. It is from this that I identified Uranus as the realm of being, Cronos as intelligible intellect, and Zeus as intellect. And yet, we can also talk about these realms triadically. The realm of being can be described as Uranus at the head, or in metaphysics, we call this the hyparxis. His wife Gaia, who you may also know by the name Gaia, is his life-giving power, and his son Cronos is the intellectual activity that reverts upon him. Now, in our metaphysics, the activity of each realm is also the head of the subsequent realm. From this, then, we get Cronos at the head of the next realm, that of intelligible intellect. His wife and sister Rhea is then his life-giving power, and their son Zeus is then the intellectual activity, who, much like Cronos with his own father, reverts to its source. Now, actually, each of the gods in these triads can further be divided into a triad of its own. So Proclus does see a place for other gods in the pantheon. And for those who want to study this in further detail, I do recommend Proclus's Theology of Plato. But for the purposes of this video, this is enough detail. Well, now that we have this basic structure, how does the myth describe the way these gods interact with one another? Or perhaps a better way to say that would be, what are the metaphysical functions being symbolically described in this myth? In each realm, the hyparxis, or that which it truly is, abides in itself. More accurately, it is the whole realm abiding in itself. The three prongs of this triangle are not representing separate parts, but rather three functions of the whole. And so the first of these functions is that of the whole abiding in itself. This is symbolized mythologically by Cronos eating his children. The second term of each triad is the power of that realm. It is the proceeding term that makes it possible for the realm to exercise its proper activity. As such, it could be understood as what proceeds outward from the hyparxis, and it connects the being to the activity. It is also what later allows the activity to revert to its hyparxis. This is symbolized in the myth by Rhea sneaking baby Zeus away and hiding him from Cronos. And this brings us to the activity of the triad. The activity is an intellectual one of reverting to its cause and thus knowing itself. This activity is a creative act that results in the unfolding of the next realm. This return is symbolized in the myth by Zeus confronting his father. He then frees his siblings, and they become the gods of the subsequent realm. And through them, Zeus unfolds the physical world. Now remember, the end of each realm is also the head or hyparxis of the next realm. We see this in Zeus being the leader of the Olympian gods, even though he is the youngest of the siblings. So now that I've laid out a brief explanation of the realms mythologized by Uranus, Cronos, and Zeus, I want to turn to the odd addition in these stories of castration. Uranus and Cronos are both castrated according to mythology, but Zeus, on the other hand, is quite promiscuous, and he plants his seed far and wide. So turning to metaphysics, what we see is that Uranus and Cronos are both fathers of realms that are transcendent and unific. But Zeus, on the other hand, leads in the unfolding of the physical realm. This is the realm of differentiation and the appearances of manyness. I would suggest then that the stark imagery of these myths makes this metaphysical insight easier to convey and perhaps easier to remember as well. And this brings us back to Euthyphro in his belief that this story is relevant to his own dilemma as to whether or not to prosecute his own father. What I hope you see in this explanation of the myth is that the metaphysical explanation is very different from the surface story. Fundamentalism focuses only on the surface story, leading its proponents to declare that whatever the gods do must be holy, no matter how ugly that surface story actually is. But Socrates urges Euthyphro to dig deeper, to find the truth behind the story. This is where true goodness and holiness will be found. And Socrates asks, now think of this. Is what is holy, holy because the gods approve it? Or do they approve it because it is holy? The gods do not act in an arbitrary way, and goodness is not determined by the arbitrary whims of the gods. We must see the truth and goodness behind the stories in order to open them up. Such is the challenge that Socrates gave to Euthyphro, and such is the challenge that Plato has left for us. Well, please let me know in the comments section what your thoughts are on this myth and on the dialogue Euthyphro. And I do hope you'll join me in my next video. And you can also follow me now on Instagram. There's a link in the description box.